has minimized your power. There is no remedy within my power, however, for it is the Lord Himself who desires to do all this. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. It is Lord Brahma that's speaking. Although the Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, formerly Jaya and Vijaya, became asuras, the demigods of this material world could not control them. And therefore, Lord Brahma said that neither he nor all the demigods could counteract the disturbance they created. They came within the material world by the order of the Supreme Personality Godhead, and he alone could counteract such disturbances. In other words, although Jaya and Vijaya assumed the bodies of asuras, they remained more powerful than anyone, thus proving that the Supreme Personality Godhead desired to fight because the fighting spirit is also within him. He is the original in everything, but when he desires to fight, he must fight with the devotee. Therefore, by his desire only, were Jaya and Vijay cursed by the Kumara. The Lord ordered the gatekeepers to go down to the material world to become his enemies so that he could fight with them, and his fighting desires would be satisfied by the service of his personal devotees. Brahma showed the demigods that the situation created by the darkness for which they were disturbed was the desire of the Supreme Lord. He wanted to show that even though these two attendants were coming in the forms of demons, they were very powerful, greater than the demigods, who could not control them. No one can surpass the acts of the Supreme Lord. The demigods were also advised not to try to counteract this incident because it was ordered by the Lord. Similarly, anyone who is ordered by the Lord to perform some action in this material world, especially preaching his glories, cannot be counteracted by anyone. The will of the Lord is excellent. The will of the Lord is executed under all circumstances. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this verse says it is the prowess or the power of these twin asuras or demons that has disturbed you, for it has minimized your power. There is no remedy within my power, however, for it is the Lord Himself who desires to do all this. So this is Lord Brahma that's speaking, and so we see uh, that Jai and Vijay, they come within the material world by the order of the Supreme Personality Godhead. And He alone is capable of counteracting their disturbances. So, in other words, although Jaya and Vijay assumed the bodies of asuras, they remained more powerful than anyone, thus proving that the Supreme Personality Godhead desired to fight because the fighting spirit is also within Him. He is the original in everything, but when he desires to fight, he must fight with the devotee. Therefore, by his desire only, were Jaya and Vijaya cursed by the Kumaras. The Lord ordered the gatekeepers to go down to the material world to become his enemies so that he could fight with them and his fighting desires would be satisfied by the service of his personal devotees. So all this is incomprehensible for the atheists. Of course, they don't read the Shastras. So you could say also they're not interested in reading the Shastras. But for devotees, this is all nectar. And you see the will of the Lord uh, being demonstrated here. He's actually the controller of everything, good and bad. So everything in the material world is actually bad. The good is bad and the bad is bad. Uh, It's not that, oh, well, there's good and there's bad, and it's all bad. But in the pastimes of the Lord, everything is good. Even the bad is good. So, uh, so we have a difference here where uh, in the material world, without Krishna consciousness, even the good things are bad. And in the material world, when the Lord ordains things, even the bad things are good. So, so we have to be, let's say, cognizant of the fact that when the Lord desires to do something, there's no fault in it. It's always good, although we may think that there's fault in it, and it's not possible. Okay, so it says here, Brahma showed the demigods that the situation created by the darkness for which they were disturbed was the desire of the Supreme Lord. He wanted to show that even though these two attendants were coming in the forms of demons, they were very powerful, greater than the demigods, who could not control them. No one can surpass the acts of the Supreme Lord. The demigods were also advised not to try to counteract this incident, because it was ordered by the Lord. Similarly, anyone who is perfect by the Lord to perform some action in this material world, especially preaching his glories, cannot be counteracted by anyone. The will of the Lord is executed under all circumstances. Well, that's something that the devotees have to have faith in. That, yeah, sometimes things look really bleak, and one may be praying to the Lord, and they don't see the immediate uh, remedial measures taking place, and they become frustrated. And then after some time, they just say, well, there's no God. This whole thing is just bogus. I don't believe in God anymore. But you have to be patient. You know, Krishna does everything in his own time, not our time, but in his own time. So we have to be patient and see what the real purpose of the Lord's actions are. But obviously, they're going to resolve all problems as time goes on. So we see, you know, let's say some people have, a lot of physical or mental problems, and their whole life looks pretty bleak. Well, we have to understand there's karma involved here. Now, when it's hard to understand that, like let's say there's a child that is born with some kind of congenital disease, and we start uh, discussing things and thinking about it, and and one child is born perfectly healthy, and another child is born with congenital disease that they'll suffer with for the rest of their life, right? So it's very hard to accept that. Why would God do this? Well, someone can say, well, it's karma from previous life. Okay, but why my child? Uh, these points are there. Well, there's a history behind everything. And usually, if you read the Shastras, you'll see that uh, someone might have committed some offenses in a previous lifetime or more. And now, because of those offenses, they become the victim and someone else becomes the victor. So, uh, however, a person who, in spite of their physical or mental state, maintains Krishna consciousness, they can survive through any of the situations that can be imposed on them. But it might take time. So therefore, we have to be patient and patient to see what is the plan of the Lord. Does he want to condemn a child for the rest of their life to use their consciousness, or only half their life, or one quarter of their life. These are all decisions that they're going to make, and you can't interfere with it. But if we are patient, we'll see that the purpose of the Lord uh, takes place in a, let's say, uh, inconceivable way. But if we're patient, we will eventually see that the Lord's plan is being executed here, not anybody else's plan. So that's why it says, well, first of all, when uh, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, formerly Jaya and Vijaya, became asuras, the demigods of this world, material world, could not control them. And therefore, Lord Brahma said that neither he nor all the demigods could counteract the disturbance they created. They came within the material world by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he alone could counteract such disturbances. He alone could control uh, Jaya and Vijaya, or Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. They came within the material world by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he alone could counteract such disturbances. In other words, although Jaya and Vijaya assumed the bodies of Asuras, they remained more powerful than anyone, thus proving that the Supreme Personality of Godhead desired to fight because the fighting spirit is also within him. He's the original in everything, but when he desires to fight, he must fight with a devotee. Yeah, because he can easily kill a demon. It just by thinking about it, they die. He has all those powers. However, when he wants to fight, well, then he arranges to fight with his own devotees. He is the original on everything, but when he desires to fight, he must fight with a devotee. Therefore, by his desire only were Jaya and Vijay cursed by the Kumaras. Now we're seeing the background understanding of what actually happened. It was the desire of the Lord. The Lord ordered the gatekeepers to go down to the material world to become his enemies so that he could fight with them, and his fighting desires would be satisfied by the service of his personal devotees. Now, this is impossible to understand by the demons and nonsense people. And even by devotees, it's hard to understand this because unless we read the purports. If we don't read the purports, we don't understand anything. But if we read the purports, then it becomes clear that this is the will of the Lord that's functioning here. Therefore, we have to be patient and let the Lord's desire take place. uh, So, there are devotees becoming demons to please the Lord, so the Lord can fight with them. Who can understand that? It's very, very difficult to understand that. But that's what's happening here. So we had to be very careful not to jump to our own conclusions, but to regularly hear Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by devotees to understand what's going on. And then we will not be bewildered by what's going on in the material world. This is what's going on, in history previously, and the same things are going on now, but we might not be able to recognize it. But one thing we have to understand: nothing can happen without the will of the Lord. Nothing. So if something is happening in some way or other, it's the will of the Lord, and we have to wait and see what his will is. Like, for example, if you look at what's going on now, there are thousands and thousands of Palestinians are being killed by the Israelis. I mean, really, a lot. You know, it runs into uh, 50,000 or more, and it includes a lot of children and women. Now, why is that happening? And the United States is supplying the weapons so that the Israelis can kill massively Palestinians. The Palestinians don't have airplanes, bombs, and things like that. 2,000-pound bombs. And but the Israelis have those bombs, but delivered from the United States. So, if I was a Palestinian and I was seeing this happen, I would be discouraged. How come this is happening? So there has to be some element of sinful activity going against the will of God to get such a severe, reaction. Now, it's not only the Palestinians, like in Africa, also there's war going on, and Darfur, the people there, they're being massacred, and even in New York City or around the United States, there's all kinds of violence and murder going on. I want you to look at how many people get murdered in the United States in one year. It's it, it could be a very large number. So we see, this type of violence is going on everywhere. And also, how many people die from medical mistakes a year? 21,000 what? Homicides, not homicides. Homicide. You got me confused there for a second. 21,000. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of people, right? And how about how many people are dying from medical mistakes? Mistakes that the doctors make. It's a big number. I think 150,000. So there's different type of wars going on, let's say. 400. 400,000 a year. 440,000 a year. Because of the medical malpractice. Medical mistakes. 440,000. And what was the other number? 21,000. I'm sorry. Murders. So there's more people dying from medical mistakes. So who's the real enemy now? It's the doctors. They're killing more people than the criminals. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay, so uh, Brahma showed the demigods that the situation created by the darkness for which they were disturbed was the desire of the Supreme Lord. He wanted to show that even though these two attendants were coming in the forms of demons, they were very powerful, greater than the demigods, who could not control them. No one can surpass the acts of the Supreme Lord. The demigods were also advised not to try to counteract this incident because it was ordered by the Lord. Similarly, anyone who is ordered by the Lord to perform some action in this material world, especially preaching his glories, cannot be counteracted by anyone. The will of the Lord is executed under all circumstances. So this is a very nice conclusion, not conclusion, but a very nice real revelation that if the Lord wants his glories to be spread by devotees, then the devotees should understand, yeah, there might be some obstacles, but they will not be counteracted. And therefore it says here, similarly, Anyone who is ordered by the Lord to perform some action in this material world, especially preaching his glories, cannot be counteracted by anyone. The will of the Lord is executed under all circumstances. So there is this history of Srila Prabhupada. He was sitting on some bench, I think in New York, and next to somebody else. And Prabhupada, when I guess the other person asked him, what he was doing in the United States, and Prabhupada said that he was going to create like a he was going to have many disciples and spread Krishna consciousness. And then, at this point, nothing would happen yet, right? So, how did Prabhupada know that? Well, it's because it's the will of the Lord, right? And although it didn't happen yet, still, he was prophesizing that it's going to happen because it's the will of the Lord. So he had that vision, he had that faith, and he knew that this is something that Krishna wanted. So why did Krishna, you know, give him a chance to come to the United States when he's 70 years old, right? There was a plan of the Lord, right? Because his guru wanted, to spread Krishna, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave the same instruction to several of his devotees. And they tried, but they failed. One time I asked Prabhupada a question. I said, why? I said, one of your god brothers went to England, another one went to, I think, Germany, and they failed. I said, why did you come to the United States? And he said, of course, one failed in England, one failed in Germany. I was thinking, let me go some other place and fail. That's what he said. So, uh, but yet, Prabhupada's determination to follow his guru's instructions was unfailing. I mean, he such an period in his life, and with no money, he comes to the United States. And by the way, they don't let you in the United States. They ask you how much money you know. Somehow or other, they got past all those things, and he comes to the United States. And at first, for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, he didn't have any success at all. And then all of a sudden, there was the Hare Krishna, what do you call, explosion, because of the purity of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, all I was doing was simply chanting Hare Krishna. So you see, those films of him in New York, in that park, I forget the name right now. Tompkins Square, yeah. He said, I was just sitting down and chanting Hare Krishna. And this Brahmananda, he came, because he wasn't Brahmananda yet, but he came and he was dancing, you know. And it was just by, playing his cartels and chanting. And then in the beginning, he didn't have hardly any money at all, but he was able to get the attention of a few people. There was Mukunda, and there was right in the beginning there was Mukunda. Let's put it like that. So uh, Prabhupada was staying with a hippie, and the hippie took some LSD and went crazy and tried to kill Prabhupada. Prabhupada ran away, and he didn't have anywhere to go, but he knew where Mukunda was staying. At that time, it wasn't Mukunda, and it wasn't his name. And he went and knocked on the door of his apartment. And Mukunda's wife at that time, was it Janaki, I think? Yeah. Anyway, she gets out of bed. They're in bed, you know. She gets out of bed and goes and answers the door. She opens the door, and Prabhupada is there, and he says, "I have no place to sleep." And she said, "Well, um, you can't come here tonight." So she slammed the door on him. Yeah, she closed the door on him. And she goes back into bed with Mukunda, and he said, "Who's that?" She said, "Oh, it's that old Swamiji." He said, "Swamiji." He said, and why don't you let him in? He said, "No, we don't want him. You know, we were together tonight. We don't want him." And he got out of the bed. I said, "What are you talking about?" Yes, he runs, and when he opens the door, Prabhupada is still there because he didn't have anywhere else to go. And then Mukunda invited him into his house, and he said, "The Prabhupada, you can sleep in our bed, and we'll go somewhere else and sleep tonight." So Prabhupada didn't get into their bed; he slept on the floor. But you can see how difficult it was for him to start the movement. Uh, very, very, very difficult. But he prevailed because he had complete faith in Krishna. Sometimes he was going down to the boat boat company to find out what boats are going to when there would be a boat to go back to in India, but he never really did it. He was thinking about it, but he didn't do it. So he was having a hard time, very hard time. But his perseverance prevailed, and eventually, there was the Hare Krishna explosion. All right. So it says here, no one can surpass the acts of the Supreme Lord. The demigods were also advised not to try to counteract this incident because it was ordered by the Lord. Similarly, anyone who is ordered by the Lord to perform some action in this material world, especially preaching his glories, not in other words, the glories of the Lord, cannot be counteracted by anyone. The will of the Lord is executed under all circumstances. So this is something, this is something we should, uh, um, make a plaque of and put it up on the wall and read it every day or remember it every day because it's very important. So we don't become discouraged if there's not immediate success. Say, uh, no one can surpass the acts of the Supreme Lord. The demigods were also advised not to try to counteract this incident. So it's the incident of Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, and they're creating havoc. However, the Brahma showed the demigods that the situation created by the darkness for which they were disturbed was the desire of the Supreme Lord. He wanted to show that even though these two attendants were coming in the forms of demons, they were very powerful, greater than the demigods, who could not control them. No one can surpass the acts of the Supreme Lord. The demigods were also advised not to try to counteract this incident because it was ordered by the Lord. Similarly, anyone who is ordered by the Lord to perform some action in this material world, especially preaching his glories, cannot be counteracted by anyone. The will of the Lord is executed under all circumstances. Okay, so how do we learn what the will of the Lord is? That's a good question. Well, it's revealed to us by the acharyas, just like the will of the Lord was to spread the glories, his glories. So Prabhupada comes to the United States with hardly any money at all, and he starts the Hare Krishna movement. It caused a lot of difficulty in the beginning, but it was destined to happen because that was the prophecy uh, of Lord Chaitanya, that the Hare Krishna movement would be heard in every town and village of the world. So that was prophesied by Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada knew that, and therefore he was simply executing the will of the Lord, spreading the movement every nook and corner of the world. You know, and he did it. He did it. Now, how come he did it? Because he was not the only one that received the order by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to preach Krishna consciousness in the Western world. Uh, he gave that order to uh, many of his disciples, and three of them tried. You know, uh, one in England, his number one disciple was Bon Maharaj, and then another one in northern Europe. I forget what his name was. Uh, so there were, several devotees had received the same order as Srila Prabhupada, to spread the movement in the English-speaking parts of the world. And the first two failed. In fact, Ban Maharaj was funded by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur for I think it was 4 years, and he was sending money from India so he could, spread Krishna consciousness in England. And after that 4 years or so, he comes back, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is waiting for him to walk down the plank from the boat. He was waiting right there when he landed in Calcutta. And he said, the first thing he said to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said, hey, your method doesn't work. Oh, it's really very insulting. And he sort of walked away from him. So, and then he tried to start his own movement, and his own movement, it had a little bit of success, but then it failed. When I say his, it was Ban Maharaj. I met him once on Prabhupada's Vyas Puja. What was it? 19, I forget, 19.
He has an institute in Vrindavan. He has a big institute in.
Yeah, he has an institute there. Yeah. Anyway, in Prabhupada's Vyas Puja, he came to it, and I was there also, and I was sitting not too far from Bon Maharaj, and the devotees were coming one by one and glorifying Prabhupada, and then they asked Bon Maharaj to say something. So, by the way, he looked like Aurobindo, very very let's say yeah, very aristocratic. Yeah, you could see he was very educated, and the way he spoke very nicely and so forth. So, what does he say? He says, we cannot deny the fact that your Prabhupada has spread, Krishna consciousness around the world. You see the way he, he positioned his words. You cannot deny. In other words, he's saying, I can't not deny that he spread the mission of Lord Chaitanya around the world. It's not a positive way of saying it, right? Because, he was, I don't know if you can say envious, but, he realized that, and by the way, Brahmananda also got a chance to speak, and Bon Maharaj is sitting there, and no, it's Brahmananda's brother uh, uh, started speaking, and he said, "Dude, nobody else." And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disciples, not one of them was able to do anything. And it's like, he was like completely smashing Bon Maharaj, and and Prabhupada was smiling. He was very happy to hear that. And I was amazed. I was thinking to myself, oh, one day I want to be able to speak like him. It was like I was, in a sense, a little bit. I kept looking at Bon Maharaj with the reaction he had, his facial reaction. I mean, but he just listened stoically, didn't say anything. And then Gargamuni just kept going on and on. Just putting layer over layer of insult. That was a very funny experience. But Prabhupada was smiling by hearing, his disciple glorify him.
One question. So
Yeah.
what was the difference because of the faith?
Yes, it's a degree of faith that you have. Obviously, Prabhupada had more faith than his god brothers, because the best of the god brothers, Bon Maharaj, and there was some other person, they tried and they failed, right? So then nobody else tried after that until Prabhupada, came to the West and started preaching, because they thought it was not possible. And actually, uh, what's his name? Uh, yeah, I organized a, a festival and invited a lot of well, I invited everyone to this festival, and the main speaker was the uh, what is his name now? Anyway, you see what after Prabhupada left, and then there was Sridhar Maharaj, who was Prabhupada's godbrother, and it was even Prabhupada said that Sridhar Maharaj was a Siksha guru, and he used to live with Sridhar Maharaj for some period of time. And so Prabhupada now it's disappeared, and it says Vyas Puja. And yeah, I organized this. Was it me or who was it? Let me just think a second. Yeah, I organized a program, to glorify Prabhupada on his Vyas Puja day. And this was in Berkeley, California. But I invited, not, what was his name? Anyway, there was Sridhar Maharaj, which is Prabhupada's god brother. And then after him, his number one disciple was, his number one disciple after Sridhar Maharaj left his body. I invited his number one disciple to come and speak on the occasion of Prabhupada's,
Yes.
Vyas Puja. And because he came, all all his disciples came also, and many of his disciples were people who were in ISKCON and left ISKCON and joined his camp and took initiation from him. there were more of those people than ISKCON people, although I organized the whole thing. So he comes, and what's his name? No. Anyway, I'll think about it. I'll think it. And when he comes, he's a very nice man, and he begins to speak. And he said, today, he said, I'm going to do what you people do. So he said, if I'm not mistaken, you people, profess your, let's say, not sins, but
confession.
Yeah, when
Confession.
Yeah, it's exactly that. To go and make confession. He says, so today I'm going to make confession. And he said, I was sitting with my guru, it was Sridhar Maharaj, and we were hearing about all the success your Prabhupada was having in the Western world. And it was hard for us to believe it because previously the best, disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, like Ban Maharaj, went to the West, was funded by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Ban Maharaj failed. And then Bhaktisiddhanta sent other disciples also, and they also failed. So then, and that was, a long time ago, and then nobody else tried after that because they thought it was impossible to spread Krishna consciousness in the Western world. And he said, but then your Prabhupada, we were hearing about all the all the success that your Prabhupada was having, and he said, and I was sitting with my guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and it was hard for us to believe it. He said, then I started traveling in the Western world myself, he said, and I saw, everywhere I went, I saw devotees, that were basically, many of them were ISKCON devotees, but came to, the Gaudiya Math after Prabhupada's disappearance. And now I was seeing what Prabhupada had done, right? He said, and I still couldn't believe it. He said it was overwhelming to see what he did. What we thought was impossible, he made it possible, right? So he was glorifying Prabhupada like that, And he said, today I'm going to make my confession, myself and my guru, we're hearing about what your Prabhupada did, but we couldn't believe it. Now I'm traveling around the world and I'm seeing, with my own eyes what he did, because, so many devotees were there now all over the world. He said, and I still can't believe it, how he did it, because they actually thought it was impossible. So he was glorifying Prabhupada like that. And what was his name? Govinda Maharaj, I think. Was that?
Bhakti Pragna Keshav Maharaj.
No,
Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj.
no. Those are god brothers of Prabhupada. No.
This Sridhar Maharaj.
Huh?
You said
He's a disciple of Sridhar Maharaj.
I think last time you also mentioned that we are eating the remnants of what Prabhupada.
Yeah, he said, we're only eating the remnants of Srila Prabhupada. He was very humble. What was his name? Well, his name is Govinda Maharaj, I think. Yes, that's it. He was a very nice man. I was lucky enough to meet him because I organized this program, and he was I asked him to come as the main speaker, and almost everybody that came were Gaudiya Math, ISKCON devotees who left ISKCON and joined the Gaudiya Math, and that's when I was president in Berkeley, and hardly any of our devotees came, and at that time there weren't so many of our devotees because most of them had left the movement and moved over to the Gaudiya Math. Right? But anyway, I invited him, Sridhar Swami, and he was a very nice man, very, very humble person. And it was a nice program. And he spoke, he said, today I'm going to make I'm going to do what you people do, you make confessions, right? So he said that we only were eating the remnants of Srila Prabhupada's, let's say success, something like that. So he was being very humble, and it was shocking because at that point he was having a lot of success, and ISKCON in different places was not doing so well. And anyway, most of the devotees that came were devotees of ISKCON that had left and joined the Gaudiya Math.
That is very good that those devotees came in your invitation. And
Yeah, they came, well, because he was speaking. I invited him to come. That's why they came.
Apparently, he was the chosen successor of Sridhar Maharaj and led the Sri Chaitanya.
Let's not go slow. Go slow.
He was the chosen successor of Sridhar Maharaj.
Yes.
And led the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Math, expanding its influence and establishing many centers worldwide.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. He was a nice man. Very, very nice. Yeah. And he spoke very nicely about Prabhupada. Okay. Yeah, I remember when I was on the GBC, at one point, some of the top leaders of the movement were seeing Sridhar Maharaj a lot. And there were actually four of them, top leaders of the movement. And they were trying to, and they were going to hear his lectures and things like that. And then they wanted to make him the next Prabhupada of ISKCON.
Oh.
Who?
Sridhar.
Yeah, Sridhar Maharaj. That's right. So this was Kamal Krishna Maharaj, Giriraj Maharaj. I don't know, there's four of them, all big devotees. And so there were two people on the GBC that were really, against this. The other GBC members were staying quiet, to see what was going to happen. And it was myself and Pritu Das. We were against this. And spoke very, very, forceful. That, it can't do this. Who this is not something that it would, it would confuse everyone. So, so then there was some period where it was very. It looked like it might succeed. They might be able to convince all the other members of the GBC to go with this. That make Sridhar Maharaj take the position of Prabhupada in ISKCON. So there were only two of us who were against this. Myself and yeah. But surprisingly, we prevailed against all these big guys, Kamal Krishna Maharaj, Giriraj Maharaj, and what's his name? It's in Hungary. I forget right now. Anyway, we prevailed, and I spoke very, very, adamantly against this. And although on the first day where we had this GBC, meeting, they heard what I said, but they would always ignore whatever I said anyway. But I was really adamant, and so the next day they actually probably had some discussions amongst themselves. They came back and they agreed not to pursue this idea of making Sridhar Maharaj the next Prabhupada of ISKCON. And what was their purpose of doing this? The purpose was that Sridhar Maharaj is an older man, so their purpose was as soon as he died, then they would become, the Prabhupads, And that's all it was about. So you see, there was always these, after Prabhupada's disappearance, there was always these controversies that were going on, and it risks, destroying the movement. And many devotees left the movement also. So, I mean, how many times can you have arguments and then people leave the movement? Eventually, there's not going to be any movement anymore because there's too many splinter groups. So, anyway, let's go back to this. So it says here, similarly, anyone who is ordered by the Lord to perform some action in this material world, especially preaching his glories, cannot be counteracted by anyone. The will of the Lord is executed under all circumstances. This is good to hear. If someone is a preacher in Krishna consciousness, this is a very good thing to remember that anyone who is ordered by the Lord to perform some action in this material world, especially preaching his glories, cannot be counteracted by anyone. The will of the Lord is executed under all circumstances. Well, we're seeing that. The movement is spreading all over the world. And devotees are taking up the responsibility to spread it, preach. So, and Prabhupada said, if you preach, you will be successful. Because that's what Krishna wants. He wants the movement to be spread all over the world. He wants everyone to come back to Godhead. And let's say everyone in the world today becomes Krishna conscious. And they all go back to Godhead. Some people say, well, what would happen, and how would the world go on if everyone went back to Godhead? Well, no, you don't have to worry because, there's unlimited number of jivas, so all the jivas that are monkeys right now, they would become human beings in the next lifetime, the monkeys, the cows, and things like that. They're all living entities, and they're all progressing in the cycle of reincarnation. And so the whole world would be filled again immediately. So you don't have to worry about, who's going to do everything if everyone goes back to Godhead. There's all kinds of statements that people make, they get all worried, well, if everyone goes back to Godhead, who's gonna do everything in the world, But no, don't worry about it because there are infinite number of jivas, and they'll just fill the whole world up right away. Okay. So I think we'll stop there. Are there any questions? Well, we got just one more page. Let me read it then. The next verse, Canto 3, chapter 16, verse 37. My dear sons, the Lord is the controller of the three modes of nature and is responsible for the creation, preservation, and dissolution of the universe. His wonderful creative power, Yogamaya, cannot be easily understood even by the masters of yoga. That most ancient person, the personality of Godhead, will alone come to our rescue. What purpose can we serve on his behalf by deliberating on the subject? Wow, this is a great, great verse. Great verse. Let me read it again. My dear sons, the Lord is the controller of the three modes of nature and is responsible for the creation, preservation, and dissolution of the universe. His wonderful creative power, Yoga Maya, cannot be easily understood even by the masters of yoga. The most ancient person, the personality Godhead, will alone come to our rescue. What purpose can we serve on his behalf by deliberating on the subject? So the purport says, when something is arranged by the Supreme Personality Godhead, one should not be disturbed by it, even if it appears to be a reverse according to one's calculation. For example, sometimes we see that a powerful preacher is killed, or sometimes he is put into difficulty, just as Haridas Thakur was. He was a great devotee who came into the material world to execute the will of the Lord by preaching the Lord's glories. But Haridasa was punished at the hands of the Kazi by being beaten in 22 marketplaces. Similarly, Lord Jesus Christ was crucified, and Prahlad Maharaj was put through so many tribulations. The Pandavas, who were direct friends of Krishna, lost their kingdom, their wife was insulted, and they had to undergo many severe tribulations. Seeing all these reverses, devotees, one should not be disturbed. One should simply understand that in these matters, there must be some plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavatam's conclusion is that a devotee is never disturbed by such reverses. He accepts even reverse conditions as the grace of the Lord. One who continues to serve the Lord, even in reverse conditions, is assured that he will go back to Godhead, back to the Vaikuntha planets. Lord Brahma assured the demigods that there was no use in talking about how the disturbing situation of darkness was taking place, since the actual fact was that it was ordered by the Supreme Lord. Brahma knew this because he was a great devotee. It was possible for him to understand the plan of the Lord. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the third canto, 16th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Two Doorkeepers of Vaikuntha, Jaya and Vijay, Cursed by the Sages. So this is a fantastic verse. We'll go over it tomorrow in more depth and detail. But these are the type of verses we have to hear to understand, how to not panic. As soon as you panic, you lose control of your mind, and you start, assuming things that are not true, and you make mistakes. So it's very important not to panic, not to have, fear and anxiety and so forth. Konteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranasya. Declare loudly that my devotee will never perish. So have to have that faith. Haribol. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions or comments?
I mean, one takeaway is that people who might say that, there's somebody, an atheist or something, there's at one point during this whole episode, we felt like, oh, maybe people will connect with Lord in different rasas. But what is clear is that you have to be first a devotee. Then the Lord has to put you in that spot,
yeah,
to have that rasa. Like that happened with Bhishma, that happened with Shishupal, and that happened with Jaya Vijay in different roles. But first you have to be a devotee. So you cannot just start blaspheming and thinking that you're playing that. So
well, we shouldn't blaspheme
exactly.
in any case. Yeah.
So, but I think that's the argument that first we have to be. There's some people might say like, oh, it's all will of the Lord, so you can be in any rasa. But first thing you want to become a devotee, having the right to be a devotee to the Lord.
Well, that's the whole goal of life: is become the devotee of the Lord and function as a devotee through devotional service. Then whatever's happening, there might be success, there might be you know negative things that happen. The devotee doesn't freak out, doesn't lose his faith, and because he knows that not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. So therefore, if these things are happening, I should, if I have to do anything, I should be more careful and more vigilant to chant my rounds and chant and follow the regulative principles. That's the understanding. It's not that, well, I'm not going to chant anymore because Krishna didn't do this or Krishna didn't do that. That's the wrong way to go. The right way to go is, well, I'm going to be more careful. I'm going to chant more, uh, you know, seriously the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and follow very strictly, more strictly the rules and regulations. And I know that Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead, and nothing can happen without His will. So there must be some plan and of the Lord's happening, and I'll just be careful not to lose my faith and wait and see what is the Lord's plan. But people with small faith, they become very, let's say, panicked, and sometimes they leave Krishna consciousness. But that's because they have strong material desires still. So if they can't see their material desires satisfied in Krishna consciousness, then they'll leave and go somewhere else to have their material desires satisfied. But if you don't have any material desires, then there's no reason to go anywhere else. You're very perfectly happy in Krishna consciousness, whether everything's successful or whether everything's not successful. It doesn't matter. The main thing is to maintain your service to the Lord. Okay, so I think we will stop there unless anybody wants to say something.
There are comments, questions online.
This line I liked which was the Bhagavatam's conclusion is that a devotee is never disturbed by reverses. He accepts even reverse conditions as the grace of the Lord. One who continues to serve the Lord even in reverse conditions is assured that he will go back to Godhead.
Yes, very nice.
It's very difficult to.
Is that in text 37 or 36? Okay. Yeah, seeing all these reverses affect devotees.
Maybe the reason for all
one should not be disturbed. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
And they all accepted will of the Lord. Arjuna, Prahlad,
yeah.
they have that. Every story shows the strong faith. Draupadi, everybody.
Well,
The lesson is stay strong in all the reversals.
Absolutely.
In case the Prabhupada, as you have explained, Prabhupada case when he came, no success in the beginning, so the Prabhupada stayed.
And very difficult
full
for him.
faith.
Very
He's
difficult.
got success.
Yeah. You have to have perseverance.
In our own Bellevue temple.
Yeah.
Huh?
Our Bellevue temple, I read it for 10 years.
Always.
For more than 10 years.
I came that year.
Yeah, but eventually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and let the will of the Lord.
Well, I mean, when I first came to Seattle, there was no success for 10 years, at least 10 years.
Mm.
But I didn't give up, And my wife was always saying, let's go back to, Berkeley. These people are here and they're not going to become devotees. And she was always negative. I said, no, let's stay here.
Kali, I mean, the influence of vital energy is so strong. People are very less patient. It's the influence of Kali.
Yeah, well, it's like, you plant the seed for a tree, right? But the tree doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
It can take 20 years for it to grow and start giving fruit.
You have to be prepared from beginning.
Yeah.
Day one, we have to be ready.
Yeah, you have to be patient, All good things will happen, but it takes time. Yeah. Okay, all glories to Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. We'll go over this next 37th one.